Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of CVtv. How are you? My name is Carlos and I'm here with my co-host David Docken, owner of Coralview. How are you, David?
Doing well, man. Welcome back for a new year.
Yeah, happy new year to you as well. How's okay, we always start with this. How's the weather down there right now?
And it's actually getting cold here, believe it or not. In the deep
Really?
south. About 40 degrees, man.
Oh my
That's cold
God.
for us.
Yeah, that is cool for you. Now you
Yeah,
got to remember they're in the south, which means that for us northerners, we
yeah,
have furnace. They don't have that. So it's
right.
like you got a little space heater in there,
Exactly. I got it running right here.
Well, it is about 20 or 19 degrees here in Chicago, and it feels like it's negative. It feels like it's 9 degrees. So
Ah,
it is cold here too as well.
yeah.
So how you been? How's health? Everything? How was Christmas and New Year's?
Oh, we dealing with the COVID battle down here, like a lot of people around the country. That kind of taking its toll on people in the office and probably outside the office as well. So I think
Yeah.
it's almost
Yeah.
just you're gonna get it at some point, I guess.
Oh yeah. No, you're gonna get it at some point. I was unlucky enough to get it right after the holidays, so I'm just I still have a residual cough, but other than that, I'm you know what? I was lucky enough to be at home and not in a
Mhm.
hospital, so I'm
Yeah,
thankful for that.
exactly. Yeah, that's
Well,
good.
I want to say hello to everybody for visiting us on this new year. This is amazing. We have Mauro Gonzalez. We have Ricardo Lasso. Hey, Ricky.
Yeah,
We also have Mike Neal. Drex is here. Connor is here as well. He's a new addition to Coralview crew.
yeah.
I
Happy
know.
to have you.
Yes, I know Jeff is here as well, and of course, Greg Carroll. I mean, you can't
Yeah.
miss those thumbs up. Smash that like button. Greg, I love it. I love it. James is also here. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for joining us. And thank you again for coming back for one more year. I hope that everybody's wishes come true. So let's. What is the show today about? Dave, what are we doing today?
Yeah. So we're talking about pH, and I think this topic kind of plays into the weather and what's going on around the country, cold weather time, CO2. So we're going to talk about that and how this plays into our hobby here of keeping aquariums.
Yeah, I think no matter what part of the country, or no, what part of the world, what
Yeah,
part of the hemisphere, here in the northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere, it just depends on what time of the year it is. But I think we all deal with the same issue, which
yeah,
is dealing with pH.
yeah,
It is amazing how pH affects our tanks, and also how sometimes I personally think that some of us tend to make it to chase it around,
yeah,
and there's only so much you can do. You can chase it, you can try to make it better, but pH is going to do what pH does, and it's what pH has been doing for millennia.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
what
with that said, though, I have to say I think there's a point, that it comes into play where you need to take a look at
yes,
it plummeting too low,
of
and
course.
maybe that's something I've learned, and we'll touch on that, but yeah, we'll get to that, and
Yeah, I mean, it's like there is no, I mean, it's kind of like pH, I think is almost the same as anything else in the hobby, which
yeah,
means that there is no right or wrong. There is a
hmm,
range, but there's no right or wrong. There's not the
yeah,
perfect par number. There's not the
yeah,
perfect water chemistry. There's not the perfect temperature. I mean, everybody runs their tanks differently. And you know what? I mean, my tank, my corals grow really well, and my pH runs in the low end.
hmm,
So, it depends on everybody. It depends on
yeah.
what everybody does.
Do you
All right.
think having a calcium reactor though plays into that, being able to maintain that on the lower end?
Absolutely. You know, and then we'll touch upon that. I mean, it's like, what can we do? What brings pH down, and then what can we do to mitigate that pH? What equipment can we use to bring it up? And yes, we are Coralview here, and we distribute a lot of products. But you know what? The beauty about this workshop is we're actually going to touch upon things that you can do that are free, that cost you nothing, to things that cost you very little money, to, you know, something that is going to cost you a lot more money. So we're going to give you options, and depending on where you are, financially and committed, you know, and into the hobby, you get to choose what you want, you know. So there's no right or wrong answer. So let's start with, what is pH, Dave?
It actually stands for potential of hydrogen, but pH is just measurement of acidity, basically, in our aquarium. Acidity to alkaline, with 7 being basic, or your baseline level. Lower than 7 gets more acidic, higher gets more alkaline.
Okay.
So, in a nutshell, that is pH. So where does pH fall into our hobby in terms of where we want to keep that for health of our aquariums and corals?
That's very good. I mean, that's technically what it is. Dave, you've done a fantastic job. And you know, how does pH affect our aquarium inhabitants? I mean, yes, you know, we know what it is, but in reality, what does it do to our aquarium inhabitants?
Well, it's the pH plays into all the other elements that we're having to add: calcium, alkalinity, and where you want to keep that. And one of the things I learned in keeping in a swimming pools is that when I was running higher calcium levels in the swimming pool, the pH you would test would be like 7.9, and I'd start seeing a film almost growing around the coping of where the water would meet the air. And it was basically a calcium level. And so, you know, I was told, lower your pH to get rid of that. And in turn, that got rid of making the water more acidic, got rid of that calcium. But when we talk about bringing this into the aquarium, we're trying to build these calcareous skeletons. And how can, you know, if we go too low on that pH, we're going acidic. How can these corals maintain this calcium and their base, their skeletal structure, if we're falling too low below this 7.9, 7.8, where you kind of, in my opinion, getting into a really delicate situation in terms of pH and maintaining what the animals in our aquarium need. So just something, you know, I learned, and maybe somebody else says they have success at keeping a lower pH, and that's what I was saying. Maybe that plays into a calcium reactor and the stability that a calcium reactor brings. But I do believe that there is this number or a certain point where you're really battling low pH. You're gonna, you know, start seeing where, especially LPS, will just do what I call a bail out. The flesh will just totally bail out from the skeletal structure. There's nothing holding it together. So that's you know, that's what we were talking about, and how pH can be really critical, and how we can try and do things to get that level, that number up.
You know, and you bring a great point, is that it also, pH, the correct level of pH is based on what you're keeping.
Yeah.
You know, if you have LPS, if you have softies, if you have SPS, or if you have a fish only tank, then pH becomes more relevant. It becomes a less of an issue. It all depends on what you're doing. So, you know, now that we know what pH does to the corals, so if pH goes up, then it allows the corals to calcify. Therefore, the corals can grab alkalinity and grab calcium, turn it into grab the building blocks and put it together and turn it into solid calcium skeleton. But if the pH goes down, then it makes it harder for the corals to get that process of calcification. And if the pH goes way too low, below the range, then it actually reverses the process, where then it starts to melt the skeleton. So then the skeleton starts to release those elements back into the water column, and that's definitely something that we don't want to do, that at least not inside our aquariums. But yes, we want to do that in a calcium reactor, and we'll get to that point. So why is it that hobbyists are constantly battling low pH? What are the culprits of low pH? What is it that makes pH drop in our aquarium?
I'd say the biggest dilemma or problem is CO2. So we know what us as humans expel. We take in oxygen and we expel CO2, and that CO2 is going to plummet pH. So especially this time of year, what we're talking about, we got windows, we're all closed up trying to keep warm, and so we're trapped inside. We're breathing out the CO2, and that's pretty much what our aquariums are taking in via a lot through the protein skimmer, and sucking that in. It's basically like a vacuum cleaner running nonstop, intaking the air around it.
Yeah, I mean, most houses nowadays are so efficient, energy efficient, keeping the heat or keeping the the AC inside. But also that pretty much implies that air exchange is going to be really, really to a limit, to a minimum, and that just causes our CO2 levels to go up inside the house. And when the CO2 levels go up inside the house, the pH in water tends to go down.
And I guess I should say, people that are living in townhomes and apartments and condominiums, that effect is even more focused, because it's a structure with many people.
Yes.
So typically that much more insulation with firewalls, and so that could be something where you battle it even more so than a residential home.
Absolutely. I mean, an office space would probably have a lot higher pH.
That was one thing we dealt with, Carlos, in the aquariums in the offices. So many people around.
Yes.
That you could really look at graphing wise the pH. As more people are around, you could see that was more of a struggle to keep that pH at a good level.
Even though you're in the South, you still had the problem, because you still had to close the windows and the doors to keep the AC on.
Oh yeah.
So either you're trying to keep the heat or trying to keep the cool air inside. You're still sealing, and causing the CO2. Houses also with multiple residents, you have a family of 4, a family of 6, the pH is going to go down on the water because there's more CO2 compared to a household where there's only 2 people. So it all depends. Everybody's different, and that's the reason why some of the equipment that we're going to talk about in the future, it might be efficient for somebody, but it might not be enough for somebody else. There's so many factors that are part of the equation that is not that easy of a solution. You have to
what about time of day too?
Yes.
You think about what point in the day are you looking at pH? If at the peak noon hour you're reading pH and you're only at 7.9 or 8, that when those lights go down, what is that pH going down to overnight?
Exactly.
Are you really getting down to some dangerously low levels?
Exactly.
So keep time of day in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I have that problem myself. You know, I hope my tank runs at a low pH to begin with, and sometimes in the middle of the night, 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, my pH could dip to the point where I start getting an alarm. You
Mm.
know, so and there's certain things that I do to keep that from happening, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So we talked about, you know, pH, what drops pH and everything, but you know, also is, you know, everybody's, you know, newbies are talking about, it's like, oh, pH, but how do I measure pH? You know, it's not like something I can just stick my finger and feel it, you know, like temperature. So what do we do to measure pH?
Well, typically there's a lot of options out there, from little handheld probes that can provide you with a digital reading to controllers with built-in pH ports on there, where you'll have a physical probe in water that'll continuously monitor pH. So, and as well as test kits. So let's not forget that. So, you know, those are pretty much your three, you know, options for testing pH and monitoring.
Yeah, every device is different too. I mean, it's like, and every device has its pros and its cons. I mean, you talk about a test kit, Dave, and a test kit is fantastic. Most of the times they're pretty accurate, but you have to manually measure this. You have to manually draw water. You have to manually, you know, count drops and stir and all this stuff. And a lot of times it just becomes too much of a chore. But then you have the pH probes, which are great. But the drawback is that they have to be calibrated on a regular basis, and then they are susceptible to some interference. Now, controllers out there like the Hydros does a fantastic job of trying to isolate. But if you have something that is producing a lot, and I mean a lot of noise that hasn't been approved by the government, by the FCC, then it can still affect pH. And we see that a lot with some of the lower end refugium lights that people are using out there, you know, to the point where I've gotten support tickets where people are telling me, it's like, hey, you know, all of a sudden my pH just completely dropped, or my pH went up. And, you know, and after we've gone back and forth, we figure out that at the same time that the pH drops or goes up is when they turn on a refugium light. You know,
so
and at that
noise,
at that point they asked me, it's like, so what do we do to fix it? And I hate to, but the answer is like, get a new light. You know, there's a reason why that light hasn't been, you know, there's no stamped or approval. It's not certified.
No FCC, no UL,
FCC, no UL, no nothing. And there's like, technically, if it's producing that much electrical noise, you probably shouldn't be using it to begin with. Right. You know, so those are the drawbacks that you have to keep in mind. So I think the best recipe is a little bit of both, right?
Yep.
You know,
a little redundancy.
Exactly. You don't have to be testing pH every day with your test kit, but, you know, every few weeks, take a test kit and just try to keep your pH probe honest. Yeah. So okay, so we talked about pH monitoring. And, you know, so now let's move on to ways to increase pH, because at the end of the day, you know, everybody that's watching this show is going after that. You know, we want to know, how can we get the pH up? But before we do that, I want to say thank you to Greg Carroll. I want to say thank you to Reefing, JB Aquatics. I want to say thank you to everybody that is watching the show. Thank you so much for coming back. Thank you so much for being here with us. We really appreciate your support. We hope you are having a wonderful beginning of a 2022 year. And we will come back on the next segment and talk about how to increase pH.
Many of the products you find at your local fish supply store come from us here at Coralview. Coralview is one of the largest distributors in the United States for aquarium products and represents a wide range of industry-leading brands, including Reef Octopus, MaxSpect, IceCap, Comore, and more. Over the years, Coralview has accumulated many brand new products that are not fit to be sent to stores, either due to damaged boxes or outdated packaging. Recently, Coralview expanded their outlet to include these open box items. Our outlet store also includes overstock, closeout, refurbished, in-store displays, and returned items. All items in the outlet store must pass a rigorous inspection and are backed by a 90-day warranty. You can find everything from protein skimmers, RODI units, pumps, test kits, and more, and all at a discounted price. Be sure to check back frequently as new discounted items are added every day.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of CVtv Workshops. We're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube, so please, if you like the show, if you like what you've heard before or hearing now, please hit the thumbs up, click on that bell, hit the subscribe button, and you'll be notified right away whenever we have a live show. Also, I'd like to remind everybody that we are also on Facebook. We have this amazing group called Coralview Cares. Community acquires research, education, and support. And it's there 24 hours. And you can ask any question you want. It's a great community of people that all share the same hobby, the same love, and they're always willing to help. So if you have a question about a fish, you have a question about a coral, you have a question about a product, even if you haven't purchased it from Coralview, go ahead and ask. And that somebody there is going to be able to help you. I mean, it's pretty much, it happens every day. And it's a great way to turn social media back into what it was meant to be, which is helpful, not what it is now sometimes. Okay. So if you have any questions about the product and you're kind of that person that, you know what, I'm fed up with social media, I don't want to deal with that, which I know many people nowadays are. I completely agree with them. So then just send us an email or head over to support.coralview.com, and that will get you a ticket to an actual support tech, and who will be able to answer any questions you have, help you with warranty, help you with replacements, or maybe purchase another part. We're here to help you out. So, and last of all, because you've seen it on the commercial, Coralview has an outlet store now, which is awesome. Just go to coralview.com and then find the outlet store, and then you'll be able to find things in there that are at a discounted rate. Now, the outlet store means that it's an open box item. Maybe, the box was damaged when it was shipped from the manufacturer, or maybe we used that product at a trade show, which is perfectly good, but it's just not good enough to be sold as new. So head on over to the outlet store and keep an eye on it. I would say bookmark it, because we always add product almost every day. So just because you don't find the product today doesn't mean that it won't be there tomorrow. All right. The only thing I'm going to say is the outlet store does have limited quantity. We don't have unlimited quantity of, damaged box skimmers. We only have 1 or 2. So again, if you see it, grab it, because otherwise it may not be there when you come back later. All right. So Dave, I want to say thank you again to Mike Neal, Greg Carroll, Connor in there, D Manuel is here, Michael Schrader is here. Thank you again for watching. Thank you again for joining us. So Dave, we were talking about pH, and we are going to talk about how to increase pH now. All right. Let's start with the simple, easy, inexpensive, zero price pH increasing methods that we can use. So what can we do to increase pH now that it's not going to cost me any money?
I think that that easiest solution is surface agitation on the aquarium. Most everybody's got a power head and a return pump in their aquarium. Get that surface moving and break the surface tension. That'll give you some gas exchange. So that really is your easiest, most cost-effective way to keep pH up.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's probably one of the best things. And in my opinion, it also is a great benefit to corals and our inhabitants. I think the more flow you have in your tank, the better the corals are going to be, not only for gas exchange, but also for chemical warfare. It takes the chemicals that corals are constantly expelling out to defend themselves and washes it off and allows the skimmer to remove it. So there are many, many benefits to water flow. I can already hear Mike Paletta, our friend Mike in here saying, water flow is great, Carlos. Water flow is great, Carlos. It's the best thing, So, and I agree with him. So what else can we do to bring pH up?
Yeah, even easier, Carlos, open the windows in your home or office. Get some fresh air in.
Absolutely.
That's a really easy, cost-effective.
Absolutely. If you live here in Chicago, at least in Chicago, when I was younger, we used to rent, and they have those radiator heaters, which are water steam pressure, and they run so high because you can't really turn them down or up. You either get heat or you don't get any heat. So sometimes it's the dead of winter, and you still have one window open in the apartment or in the house to just let some of that heat out, because otherwise it gets too hot. That helps a lot. I know that window opening might not be the best thing to do, but you don't have to have it open 24 hours a day. Maybe just open it a few hours every so often, and it'll help. It'll help a great deal. All right. And the last thing that we can do to increase pH is also lights, right, Dave?
Yeah, get those lights on. Yeah. Maybe you want to extend your photo period if you can. So.
Exactly. You want to do is change your photo period. The longer you have your lights on, the pH will maintain up. So if you can extend that photo period in the middle of winter, that'll help you a little bit. If you just want to turn on the lights in the middle of the night for a little bit, maybe not at 100%, but just a tad bit, that might work. Corals and fish will be okay. I'd rather have that light than have really low pH, and then have what you said, especially if you have LPS, if you have bailouts, that's not going to work. That's just not going to do it. All right. And then, okay, so now let's cover things that we can do inexpensively, that we can do that will help us to do pH without going out and breaking out the bank. And the one thing I know is that people use is the protein skimmer. They connect it to the outside, right?
That's my favorite one, Carlos, that I've had, great success with, especially at our last place. And when I was able to run the skimmer line outside the building, it was a dramatic difference in being able to keep the pH. Lowest I would see it get was 8.1, with a peak of almost 8.4 during the day. It was just an amazing difference being able to take in outside air.
Yes.
So that was really a benefit. Now, that's not always possible for everyone.
Yes, of course.
Where we are here now, we have this big equipment room and an aquarium, and everything's kind of centered in the building. And it's like, might not be able to get a skimmer line out through the roof of the building. But so it's not something that can always be done. But if you have that ability, it definitely works.
Correct. And even if you don't have the ability to do that, we have other things that you can do. But we're talking about inexpensive things right now.
Yeah.
Yes. So the only thing I'm going to say with running the line to the outside is that the longer the line is, you have to make sure that the diameter of the line, it's wider and wider and wider. So the longer the line, the wider the diameter should be. Because if you run a very long line and it's only 1/4 of an inch, then the skimmer is not, the friction is not going to allow the skimmer to freely pull air, and it's technically going to choke the skimmer, or at least it's going to reduce the performance of the skimmer substantially.
Yeah.
So one thing to keep in mind is if you are running the line to the outside, make sure that it's wide enough so that the skimmer can still freely pull the air from the outside into the skimmer chamber, and we have some great skimmers out there. Those reef octopus skimmers are fantastic. They come with the various pump, and that various pump is a workhorse.
Yeah, it pulls a lot of air. We do a lot of measurements with SCFH and meters and seeing how, I was testing that, how far a line can I run before I start seeing a performance decrease. So, but they really pull a tremendous amount of air, which makes running that line outside even more possible to accomplish.
Absolutely, absolutely. When you go and get yourself a skimmer, the heart of the skimmer is the pump.
Is the pump.
Is the pump.
And
That's the one thing that you want to see.
I've tested that with other pumps, and there was a dramatic performance decrease. It just wasn't able to handle that resistance with a long length of tubing. So just something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. So pH, again, so pH goes up if you pull air from the outside into the protein skimmer, and that's great. Now, again, as we've mentioned before, this is not written in stone, and it doesn't work for everybody. You know what? Because if you have a household where 2 people, then probably that will work. But if you have a household or an office with 6 people in it or more people, then probably that is not going to be enough to bring that pH up as much as you want to. So again, depends on your situation and depends on the environment. That's going to dictate what you may need to do. All right, so going to the next one, you know, a little bit higher in price, you know, and now we're talking about things that we can add, equipment that you can add. Well, not really equipment, but you know, there is also sodium bicarbonate and soda ash. You know, baking soda and soda ash. You can add to the tank to bring your pH up. Let's talk about that because it's not that simple. It's efficient, but there are a couple of other things that you have to keep in mind. So what do you think about that, Dave?
Now you're referring to the balling method. You know, if that's how you're handling 2-part or sometimes 3-part. Here we're showing our sodium bicarbonate 2-part with the Reef Endurance line. So, you know, there's sodium bicarbonate and also soda ash. And, you know, is one more beneficial to increase in pH than the other? That's, you know, is that up for debate?
Yes, it is. But they both work. They both work.
They both work.
They both work very well. But what is it that we have to, but it's not as simple. If we do pH, I can't just grab a cup of soda ash and add it to the tank with corals in it. Because what happens if I do that?
That goes to pH and rises maybe too dramatically.
Too dramatically, and also it will probably increase your alkalinity.
Yeah.
You know, it'll increase your alkalinity. So, you know, this is where it gets a little more complicated with things. You have to balance, you know, the beauty about our aquariums is that it's an ecosystem. And just like any other ecosystem, there's so many things that they have to play together and they have to play nice, you know, that we can't just go ahead and add one thing because it'll affect something else. So soda ash is fantastic to run, but you have to make sure that you keep track of your alkalinity because you don't want to add too much to the point where you're driving your alkalinity, because even though your pH will be okay, your alkalinity will be too high and your corals will start to suffer. So you have to do everything, you know, be very careful about it. So, all right, let's move on to the next one, which would be Saltwater.
Yeah.
Now, Saltwater to me is one of those almost perfect things that just it just works so well, and corals absolutely love it. What do you think about Saltwater?
You know, is that one of the things, you know, in combination with a calcium reactor where you're running it reverse cycle, you know, to keep the pH up overnight? A lot of people love Saltwater to run in combination with calcium reactors or just as a standalone for providing calcium and buffering pH. So it's a cheap and it's a great solution.
Absolutely. And you know, the thing about Saltwater is that it increases both calcium. It increases not both, but it increases calcium. It keeps alkalinity, increases alkalinity as well, and it also increases your pH. It's like the trifecta of things that you want, and it increases them at a very nice and consistent level. So that's what makes Saltwater so good. So yes, we can run it with a calcium reactor, but let's leave the calcium reactor out of it right now, because if you have a small tank, where you have only a few corals, and you don't want to go with a calcium reactor, or you don't want to go with the balling method, Saltwater is absolutely amazing. Saltwater by itself has a pH level of 12.2 or 12.3. I mean, somebody correct me if I'm wrong in here, but that just allows your pH to stay up and stay up and stay up. So you can keep your alkalinity, you can keep your calcium, and you can keep your pH up just by adding Saltwater. And nowadays, we have this ice cap and reef octopus reactors that make adding Saltwater so easy. And I think I'm going to ask our producer April to put that slide again, slide 18. So you have on the right side of the picture, on the left side of the right side of the picture, if that makes sense, you have an ice cap. And then to the right side, all the way to the right, you have a calcium reactor by Reef Octopus. Two reactors that have been around very, very long time. One has a magnetic stirrer at the bottom, and the other one is actually a motor stirrer at the top that has this propeller, and it runs it very slow. The one thing I'm going to say on this one is that, please, if you do have any of these two reactors, you only run the motor for like 5-6 seconds. That is it. And you do that 4 or 6 times a day. Don't grab that motor and run it for 15 minutes, or don't take that motor and run it for an hour. Those motors have a limited lifespan. If you run them for about 5-10 seconds every 4 or 6 hours, they will last you a very long time. If you run them for 15 minutes or an hour, they won't last you. They'll last you a few months, and that's it. Okay. So FYI, you don't have to keep mixing Saltwater all the time. You can just kind of mix it a little bit to get the slurry, and then just get that water to be high in pH, high in alkalinity, high in calcium, and then put that water into your tank. And you only have to do that 4 or 6 times a day. That's it.
Now, so when you're running Saltwater, Carlos, I think it's imperative that you're monitoring pH, and maybe you're dosing that Saltwater based off your pH reading. Would you agree to that?
Absolutely. And that's where you go back to that Hydros controller.
Yeah.
You have to have a controller, and this is going to be slide 8. You have a controller that constantly monitoring your pH, just in case the pH gets a little too high. And let's say your pH is approaching 8.5, 8.4. At that point, you say, you know what? Okay, let's go ahead and stop the Saltwater, allow the pH to come down a little bit, and then we'll start it again. And you can automate this with a controller, which is super, super easy to do. The other thing you can do also is you can get an FX-STP pump by Chemours. And the FX-STP pump can run 24 hours, 24/7. And what you would do is you would set that pump on that Saltwater reactor to run at, let's say, 3 milliliters per minute. So it's like a drip every 3 or 4 seconds, and what that would do is it would slowly, but very, 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 very nice and evenly keep your pH up. It wouldn't spike your pH. It wouldn't spike your alkalinity or your calcium. It would just keep it very gently up and up and up, and that's what makes it so well. And when that FXTP is running at 3 milliliters per second, or 3 milliliters per minute, or 5 milliliters per minute, you can't even hear the motor run. I mean, it's not like click, 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 click,
Right.
like we know with the React. This one, you cannot hear it. Now, if you're trying to run any doser pump at 40, 50, 60 milliliters per minute, then they're going to get louder, So Saltwater is amazing. All right. Well, everybody, so far, you're watching CVtv workshops, and we're talking about pH. My name is Carlos. I'm here with my awesome guest, my awesome co-host, David Dawkin, owner of Coralview. If you like the show, we're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. We do this every 2 weeks. So if you like the show, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the little bell to be notified when you get when we're going live. Also, if you have any questions about any product that we have, questions about a coral, questions about a fish, head on over to Facebook. We have a Facebook group called Coralview Cares, Community Aquarist Research, Education, and Support. And we're there. A lot of people are there, willing and able to help out. If you are one of those people that has cut off social media, and you know what? My wife did that. My wife said no more social media for her account. I wish I could do that, but I can't. But she did anyway. But if you're not in social media, just head on over to support.coralview.com, submit a ticket, and one of our reps is going to be able to help you out with any questions you have. So let's keep talking here, Dave. What else can we do to increase pH? Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was going to say algae reactors.
Yeah.
Right?
So, let's talk about, now we kind of moving into equipment.
Yes. Now we're talking. Now everybody, we're as we say, as we go into the show, we started with zero price, a little bit of expensive, then maybe a little more. Now we're going into a little more equipment, something in over $100, sometimes $200. But those are things that you can do that are more efficient to get your pH up. So light reactors. You used to have one in your old tank, right, Dave?
I'm a huge believer in scrubbers. I never was in the past, and I got to give it to my friend Richard Back, aficionado channel. He turned me on to scrubbers, and wow, it's like a protein skimmer. It's almost a godsend to what these things can do, and it's natural. It's just growing macro algae, and it's really a benefit in numerous ways, and pH being one of those.
Absolutely, and you know what? And the thing about it is that the algae scrubber, there are so many additional benefits to running it. What else did you see that was beneficial from the algae scrubber?
I was battling PO4 and so much, and trying many different ways with carbon dosing and all kinds of chemicals, and went to a scrubber, and it was just an amazing transformation for my system at the time. So, and that's just one of the benefits of it.
Absolutely. Now, for newbies, you said PO4. What is that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Phosphate. Phosphate levels were
okay.
Through the roof.
And without getting,
and those kind of fall in similar line together, NO3, but really I was dealing with high nutrient levels.
So nutrient levels. So you're dealing with phosphates and nitrates, which both contribute to hair algae. So for that newbie that is battling hair algae out there, check your nutrients. Now, we're not saying you have to get a scrubber, an algae scrubber. If you're a newbie, it's probably part of the cycling process. But, it's something to look forward to, or do your research and read up on it, because you probably need it in the future. Scrubbers are great. I run one as well, and it is fantastic what it does. Just like you, Dave, the amount of algae that comes out. I'm at the point where I have a hard time keeping nitrates in my tank. I actually, my scrubber is so efficient, along with my Reef Octopus skimmer, is so efficient, then my nitrates are so low that sometimes I actually have to feed my tank a little more to get my nitrates right. But FYI, people, just full disclosure, make sure you test your nitrates before you go on and start adding food, so before
another thing with that too is the lighting schedule on your scrubber. Maybe you want to run a reverse schedule.
And that's the trick with the pH, right? That's what makes the pH go up. Is the algae scrubber usually runs in the middle of the night. So algae scrubber is on when the main lights are off. Main lights are on when the algae scrubber is off.
Right.
Absolutely. That's great. I mean, and you're getting to IceCap makes some really nice algae scrubbers out there. We have this new hang on the back algae scrubber that I thought was pretty damn cool.
Yeah, that's great for smaller tanks and people that want to have a scrubber.
Absolutely.
Check that out. And even our new Pro Series where it's just a drop in. You don't need
Yes.
to physically plumb anything. If you have the space in your sump, drop it in and plug it in.
You don't have to worry about leaking because it's already in the sump. You know, that's great. And the lights are fully sealed. They're they're IP67, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, you can put them in the water.
No
and
high
they'll be
voltage,
perfectly fine.
with these other models where you got
Absolutely.
these big, basically they're outdoor rated floodlights and with an AC plug on the end. So
I know exactly. What are the new lights? They're 12 volts, right?
they're 12 volts, yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's
So there's
individual rows of LEDs inside. So
yeah, they're
it makes
fantastic.
it safe and they're still very efficient.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. Now, the last thing that we can do to keep pH up is a CO2 scrubber, air and a carbon dioxide scrubber. Now, how do you like those, Dave? I mean, those have been around for a long time, but there's been a search for their use lately in the last couple of years.
I think because so many people are battling this pH problem, and I tell you that the media, these CO2 scrubbers, they just work. People that really can't have any other option, this will work, and you can physically trace that and track that with your if you're looking at your hydros, for example, look at the history when you've added that CO2 scrubber and how it's boom. Yeah. You can physically, and when when the media is starting to be exhausted, it starts headed back down.
Exactly.
So
now, the reason people look at the thing and it's like, how can that be expensive? There are no moving parts. It's just acrylic with media inside. The reason why we put it that way is because, first of all, you have to buy the reactor, which is the acrylic, the container. And then on top of that, you're going to have to constantly change the media. That's something that you're going to have to do. Some people have to do it on a weekly basis. Some people have to do it every 2 weeks. Again, let's go back to what we talked about at the beginning of the show, and we've talked throughout the show, is that, it depends on your environment. The manufacturer could say, it'll raise your pH up to, 0.2 pH or 0.3 pH. You got to remember the key word is, or the key phrase is up to. It doesn't guarantee you that it's going to raise it by 0.2 or 0.3. And it's not going to say, you can't go back and say, hey, Dave's tank could raise it by 0.2. Mine only raised it by 0.1. So mine is not working. It's different. Again, how many people live in the house? What kind of windows do you have? Are your windows newer? Are your windows older? What kind of air exchange do you have there? There's so many things that you have to take into consideration in order for something like that to work. Everybody's different. Yes. So,
and what about how to make it more efficient? Carlos, what about recirculating?
Absolutely. There are a lot of DIY places out there, and unfortunately we don't have any pictures for that. I thought about it, but then I didn't want to go ahead and patent and copyrights and all that. And I was like, you know what, we don't want to deal with that. But there are people out there that have created adapters that you can put in a protein skimmer that allows you to grab all the air coming out of the skimmer and send it back to the pump, and then all the air coming out of the skimmer pass through the CO2 scrubber and back into your pump, then back into the skimmer, back into the scrubber. So you're grabbing the same air over and over and over and passing it through the scrubber, pressing it through the scrubber. And the benefit of that is that it's going to make the life of the media much longer. Exactly, because by definition that air has less CO2 when it passes, and the second time is less CO2. The third time, and the fourth time, and the fifth time, you're never going to get pure air without CO2, but it will constantly diminish the CO2 to the point where the media will exhaust a lot slower.
Yeah. And people ask, well, how do you know when the media is going out or bad? Well, you can track it with your pH, but you can also see that it's color changing. So it will physically turn to a pink color. when it is exhausted.
Yeah, and you can find it in many places. I know there's places on eBay, there's places on Amazon that sell it. But again, unless you have a pH probe to tell you when the media is exhausted, you know, some of the less expensive media out there is less expensive because they don't have that color changing, you know, whatever that chemical it is that changes when the media can no longer absorb any CO2, then it changes to pink, or sometimes it changes to blue. But, you know, so make sure that if you go another route, we're not saying, you know, we sell the media at Coralview, but if you decide to go another route, which is totally fine, just make sure that you buy the color changing media, because it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, we tested a lot of different media, Carlos. Some stuff just didn't have the I guess the performance that it would last as long. There's a lot of inferior grades out there, but you know, it's out there. So just keep that in mind when you're purchasing that stuff.
Absolutely. So now, you know, gone through the, you know, what can we do to increase your pH? So we pretty much covered, you know, we've covered water agitation, you know, on the non-expensive, zero price water agitation, and opening up your windows, as well as turning your lights on a little bit longer. Then we went into the little more expensive, but, you know, under, you know, $50 or something like that. And we went right to the sodium bicarbonate or soda ash. Then, you know, went up a little bit in price, and says Saltwater, you have the equipment to buy, then you have the light reactor, and then you have the CO2 reactor. And the last three are more expensive, okay, but they're going to be a little more efficient at getting your pH up compared to, you know, all the other things. Though I'm telling you, sometimes opening windows is the easiest thing to do, but sometimes it's not feasible.
Exactly.
You know, so should we be concerned? I mean, we've dedicated the entire show, the entire workshop to pH, but I have to ask the question. It's like, should we be concerned about pH? I mean,
well, yeah.
Should we be chasing pH to the point where it's like, oh, it's not 7.5 or it's not 7.3. I have to do changes. You know, it's 8. I'm sorry, it's 8.1 instead of 8.3. I have to go and buy a reactor. Should I be concerned about that?
You know, at those levels, you know, you said last, I would say no, you don't want to chase. But I do feel like there is a certain point where you're getting into, you know, that mid-7 range where it possibly could be, you know, getting into that danger zone, if you want to say.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about, you have, you know, we hobbyists over the years have figured out that there is a safe range. You know, there's, you know, with a reef tank, there's no absolute number that works. Not with anything. I don't think you know, can you think anything off your top of your mind that is absolute, that is like, you have to have this number, otherwise it's not going to work? No, it's all about ranges. It's all about safe ranges. So I'm going to ask April to put that last picture again. You know, this picture is amazing. You know, the safe range is 7.8 to 8.4. So I know Jack Reefer asked, you know, my pH fluctuates from 8.24 to 7.99. Is that okay? You know, my answer is it within this? Is it within the range? Yes, it is. Therefore, it's okay. It's perfectly fine. I don't think, I mean, if you're going into the 7.5, then you have a problem, and then you should look into it. But if you're within the 7.8 to 8.4 range, then you have a fantastic spot. You know, technically, you are going to be the envy of most of us, because most of us cannot keep it that high. You know,
that's great.
Yeah. So don't go chasing numbers.
Mm-hmm.
You're chasing a range.
Yeah.
You know, there are no absolutes in the hobby. You know, so you're chasing a range, not a number, an actual number. You know, pH, alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, it's all the same. You know, there's a recommended number for magnesium. The recommended number could be 1300. It could go up to 1550. You know, it's a range. You know, same thing with pH. Okay.
How about your range, Carlos, with running, you know, talking about calcium reactors?
My calcium reactor.
Worry about it.
my range can go sometimes, if I'm not careful, it can go down to 7.5.
Wow.
And it will go up to around 8 maybe, and that's as high as it gets. So I have a Saltwater reactor in addition to my calcium reactor, and the reason why I use the Saltwater reactor, it has nothing to do with calcium, it has nothing to do with with alkalinity. It has everything to do with pH. If that pH is starting to get to 7.7, 7.6, that calcium reactor goes on, and then it gets that pH up to something like 7.8. Keep it around that area until the lights come up. So and some people say that you have to have your alkalinity, your pH at 8.8, 8.3 in order to grow corals. Look at my tank. It grows. Again, everybody's different. Every tank is different. You're chasing a range. You're not chasing a number. All right. So, again, thank you everybody for watching. You're watching CVtv workshops. I'm Carlos. I'm here with my co-host David Dakin, owner of Coralview, and we want to say Happy New Year. First of all, I hope I hope you're still working on your New Year's resolutions and you haven't given up on them yet. I know I've given up on them so far, but I'll try again. You know what? You can always try next year, I guess. So we're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. So if you like the show, if you like what you hear, we have these workshops every 2 weeks or so often, and just hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, hit the thumbs up, and you'll be notified right away when we go live. Also, head on over to Coralview Cares. It's a Facebook group where you can ask any question you want about a product, about a coral, about anything. Even if you didn't purchase it from Coralview, there's a large community of people there, all sharing the same love for the hobby and always willing to help. And if you're one of those people that has decided to, say no to Facebook or say no to social media, you can always go to support.coralview.com, submit a ticket, and we'll be more than happy to help you with product questions, warranties, purchases, replacements. Pretty much, just reach out to us, and then we'll be able to help you. So, yes. So, Dave, it's been a great show. I mean, it's our first show of 2022. This is awesome. This was fun.
Yeah, I want to tell people, not every show we do may just be on hydros or something that we are trying to sell. We're just trying to, share our knowledge and love of this hobby, and hopefully maybe somebody learns something in the process and makes it more successful.
Absolutely. And Dave and I and the entire the producer April and we sat down and we decided, it's like, what, how can we make this workshops a little better to help everybody? And I think this format just works out better. Sometimes we do hydros, but sometimes we just talk about things that everybody wants to know. What's the problem and how can we fix the problem? And I think it's a much more helpful video. I think I like it a lot better. So anyway, again, if you like the show, hit the subscribe button. We stream live on Facebook and on YouTube. Other than that, I'd like to say thank you to Chad. I'd like to say thank you to Mauricio from Monterrey, Mexico. Mauro, pardon. Bob Winfrey, Greg, Doug, Michael Schrader, Connor helping out with the comments. Also, Jeremy. I want a big thanks to Jeremy, a graphic designer, for coming up with all those fantastic graphs. I want to say thank you to April, who's always coming up with those amazing shows. Did you see the commercial now has voiceover? I know. It's getting fancier. Yeah. I know. So, she does a fantastic job. Great. So on behalf of myself, Carlos, and my co-host David Dakin, want to wish you a happy 2022 year. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.